Hey there, I'm Christopher Schoenwald, and welcome to Life as a show intently focused on helping people find their professional pathway by exploring and unearthing the details of jobs from around the world. Today, I'd like to start with a question for you. How many of you have watched the television program CSI? Or how about NCIS, Naval Criminal Investigative Service, right? Both represent these genres of crime and criminal behavior. Both have been on television for like 20 years. I don't know about you, but part of me when I watch these programs, I always kind of wonder, to what degree are they accurate, for one? And then also, two, what would it be like to actually have a role, be a special agent? Well, within the premise of this program, I have been endeavoring to find that answer out. And I gotta say, it is not easy. It's not easy to find an agent that is, one, willing to talk about this, and then two, getting clearance. But, as they say, persistence does pay off, and I was able to track one down. I have a guest on today, Laura Merz. She's a special agent for the NCIS, again, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. She's involved with investigating felony-level fraud investigations, crime scene processing, counterintelligence, counter-terrorism, insider threat management, and a bunch of other things. And we have this really engaging talk lined up for you today where we cover some of those roles that I was just explaining, but then also some of the other things, things like, we debunk what these shows present versus the actual reality of what they're all about. And also, too, there's some elements that might surprise you that are fairly accurate in how the shows depict these professions. Beyond that, we look at the profession itself in terms of the stresses, the pressures, and how somebody like Laura decompresses and gets her way through. We examine how her unlikely path led her to becoming a special agent. We look at also issues of technology, the role it plays as far as it being a fairly helpful tool, but then also too a bit of a challenge for agents to keep up with. And then finally too, we have the story, and I'm just going to leave you with this. It involves Laura, a murder in Germany, and German authorities. And yeah, that's all I'm going to give you. It's super engaging, and you're just going to have to tune in for it. So, with all that in mind, let me more formally introduce you to Laura, and then we'll welcome her to the show. So, Laura Mertz is a special agent for the NCIS, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Armed with an undergrad from Columbia University and a master's degree in forensic science and technology from George Washington University, her roles and responsibilities stretch across a wide spectrum. Specifically, though, Laura plays a major role for the NCIS as far as being involved with felony-level fraud investigations, crime scene processing, as well as counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and insider threat management. Her career within the Naval Criminal Investigative Service has seen her hold posts for the U.S. military in Europe, Asia, and North America. And not to be overlooked, Laura's early career experiences also capture interest for many. She was a CSI. Yeah, CSI, that TV show? Yeah, she was one of those, a crime scene investigator for the Wichita Police Department, involved in all aspects of that particular profession. And in 2012, she released an acclaimed book on her experiences as a CSI, which broke down many of the stereotypes portrayed by popular media. So with all that stated, Laura, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the program. Hey, how are you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Before we do get started, I do understand that you do need to make a statement on your appearance, based on the subject matter and what we're going to be speaking of. So I'll just throw it over to you really quickly here before we get going.
Yeah, I just need to say that, everything I'm saying is my own personal experience and beliefs. I'm not speaking on behalf of my agency or the United States government. This is all just my personal experience.
Yeah, great. Okay. All right. Well, why don't we jump into it all right now? I do have the first segment actually lined up. It's something called Coloring Wikipedia. And as my listeners know, it's a segment basically where I just read off a definition of the guest's profession, of the work, sometimes their industry. I do it for a couple of reasons. One, it brings everybody up to speed who might be a little bit cloudy on the work itself. And also, two, I think it's interesting in the sense that, based on different geographic regions or even cultures around the world, sometimes even personalities as well. I think we begin to own the jobs in a certain sense, and we put our own slant on things. So I think it's interesting to always hear it from the perspective of each guest. It might be a little bit different for two people holding the same position. So, with that in mind, I do have you down here for, of course, Naval Criminal Investigative Services, NCIS. I went with this broad sort of Wikipedia entry, and I'm going to forewarn you, it is very wordy, and I may stumble through this definition, but I'll do my best. And then afterwards, maybe you can comment. That sounds all right to you.
Sounds great.
Okay. Well, here we go. Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS. The United States Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, is the primary law enforcement agency of the U.S. Department of the Navy. Its primary function is to investigate criminal activities involving the Navy and Marine Corps, though its broad mandate includes national security, counterintelligence, counterterrorism, cyber warfare, and the protection of U.S. naval assets worldwide. NCIS is the successor organization to the former Naval Investigative Service, NIS, which was established by the Office of Naval Intelligence after the Second World War. One half of NCIS personnel are civilian, with the other half being special agents. NCIS agents are armed federal law enforcement investigators who frequently coordinate with other U.S. government agencies and have a presence in more than 41 countries and on U.S. Navy vessels. NCIS special agents are supported by analysts and other experts skilled in disciplines such as forensics, surveillance countermeasures, computer investigations, physical security, and polygraph examinations. Whew, it is a mouthful, and I mostly got through it, stumbled a little bit, but yeah, first take, what do you think of that?
I do think it's very wordy, and it's very broad, but that's kind of indicative of the agency itself and the mission. We cover criminal investigations, we cover counterterrorism and counterintelligence. We've got all these different specialties. And really, it's not a large agency. We always joke the FBI has more agents in New York City than we have worldwide. So,
wow, really?
yeah. So it's when you're covering the globe, you do tend to become jacks of all trades.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, all right. Would there be anything that you'd like to add to the definition, or maybe even de-emphasize to a certain extent?
Well, I do think that oftentimes people will get confused about the term civilian because we work for the military. So we're basically, almost all of us are not military members. We don't have ranks, that kind of thing. And so in my line of work, we refer to ourselves always as civilians. But yes, we've got the sworn law enforcement part, and then we also have the analysts and the administrative folks and the specialists who support us. So okay. It's kind of different definitions of civilian.
Yeah, I guess so. Because I think, in the definition here, it's like, well, one half of personnel are civilian, and the other half being special agents. And you,
right.
Basically, you are a special agent, but then what you're saying is that you also consider yourself within that context of still being a civilian rather than part of the military. Is that
correct? Yeah, we don't wear uniforms, we don't salute, and so it's important to have that distinction.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you put that in there. Okay. Well, I do understand, in preparing for this talk and some of the information that you supplied beforehand, that your primary responsibilities are split between two areas mainly, the criminal and fraud investigations and then threat management unit. And they sound, at least to me, very different in terms of what you'd be looking at, what you'd be involved in. But maybe you could break that down for us lightly. What types of roles and responsibilities do both of those areas, demand of you?
So yeah, I mean, criminal investigations and fraud. I mean, that's if you watch any sort of crime TV show, right, a police department, so you're going to be dealing with sexual assaults or murder or with fraud. It can be everything from contract fraud to just payroll fraud. So it depends on the, what comes in the door that day. The threat management unit, we joke around that it's the future crimes unit. And so the idea is, can you identify someone who may become a threat, an insider threat, an active shooter, and they haven't done anything yet? So obviously we're not arresting them. We're not trying to do anything punitive, but can we figure out what the stresses are in their life, what's going on, and can we mitigate that? If someone is having a problem with a supervisor, can they be moved to a different unit, not as a punitive measure, but to make their life easier? If they're having trouble working nights, can they move to a daytime shift? That kind of thing. Anything that we can to sort of ease the burden on the person so that we don't have a major incident.
Oh,
stemming from them.
wow, that's really interesting. I mean, it was just striking me as like this hybrid between like I don't know, like it's almost like HR, HR, in a way, right? But also like with this like umbrella of like, well, this could get dangerous if we don't do something. So you're trying to like almost, at least this is the way I'm taking it, like analyze this person's situation, maybe more so than that, more so than what they're doing right now as well, and trying to project, well, if we do this, maybe things could calm down. But I don't know if I'm on anything there, but it sounded like in this sort of perverse sort of world where, yeah, you have these dual responsibilities. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of a cross between law enforcement and psychology, sociology.
Yeah, yeah. So I was trying to
To
get there.
really,
Yeah.
yeah, to really get in the sort of figure out what's going on in their life, and
Mm,
can we improve that? And I think the military does a pretty good job of having resources available for folks. So if they're having financial stress, hey, there's financial planners available. Can we get them
yeah.
in an anger management course?
Yeah.
Something to help, and so that way they can continue working, and continue being productive, and we can sort of all sleep a little easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Quick question with that. I mean, do these people who are being observed or being, trying to be assisted or helped, are these people aware of your involvement, or is this kind of in behind the scenes where?
It depends on the case. Sometimes, if a report comes in, and we have enough talking to someone's supervisor or coworkers, the person reporting it, we might be able to suggest they make changes, and they never know we're involved.
No.
Other times, we might bring them in and talk to them, be like, hey, people have expressed some concerns, like what's going on, like,
Right.
and that has to be done in a very delicate manner, because whenever anyone's brought into NCIS, like, am I in trouble? No,
Right.
you're not
Right.
in trouble.
Yeah.
You didn't do anything wrong. We don't want to add more stress to their lives by
Certainly.
being involved.
Certainly. Yeah. Well, it sounds like to me, I mean, between those two responsibilities, those two sort of units that you're part of, you would see a wide array of different cases, a wide array of different situations, and be involved in a lot of different types of activities. And from having a number of guests on this program like that, to me, and what I've heard is like that adds to the level of satisfaction with the job and reward. I mean, you're constantly being like stretched and pulled in a lot of different directions, and although that can be stressful at times, it can also help add some intrigue to the work that you're doing. Would you say that's accurate for you in your work?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I've worked all different kinds of cases, and especially with NCIS, you can be in a large office where you have like 50 or 60 agents there, and
Mm,
so you end up focusing on one particular area. But then you can also be in a small office, one or two people, and so
mm,
you have to handle whatever comes in the door.
wow.
And some of those times that you have to sort of white knuckle your way through it and think, oh, I don't know how to do this, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
some frantic phone calls to some experts. but
Right.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it does, the variety makes it a really interesting career.
It sounds like it. Yeah. Yeah. I guess in terms of like your daily, I don't know, weekly routines, like do you have such a thing, or is it based on what you're just sharing there that you never know what you're going to get? You never know what's going to be on your plate, or, you know what I mean? Or is there like a certain structure, procedural structure in place that sort of, gives that element of routine to your work?
I wouldn't say routine. You certainly have days and even weeks where it's a lot of paperwork, because the TV shows don't show that. You have to write reports. The ultimate goal is either that commands understand what's going on, or that it ends up in court. And so you have to have the reports. You have to document everything that
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
I spent 2 days ago, I spent a long time on YouTube learning pivot tables for Excel. And I'm thinking, oh, the glamorous life of a federal agent, watching videos of pivot tables. So you have days like that. And
Yeah.
then you also have days where you get a phone call, and they say, hey, we have to go to Greece right now because someone died and we don't have anyone there. So, okay, I'm going to pack my bag, get on a plane, and fly to
Wow.
Greece.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, that certainly would throw a wrench in things, I suppose, at times, but in a good way, maybe. I mean, considering outside of what like the reason is for it, I mean, the element of your job and what you're doing. does provide that opportunity to mix things up. And again, referencing a lot of the guests on my program, that's something that a lot of them come to enjoy, and derive a lot of satisfaction from. So it sounds like it could be the case for you too here in that sense, maybe.
Yeah, I knew I was never going to really be someone who could fit in with a job where you're doing the same exact thing every day.
Yeah.
I've done summer jobs in high school, data entry, and it was fine for a summer job, but not something that I was going to be able to make a career.
Right, right. Well, speaking of the past, maybe you could slide into a new segment here, something called a pathway segment. And this is a segment basically where I've put it in the last couple of months to kind of highlight this notion of how a lot of professionals don't necessarily follow this straight line. They don't beeline to the end goal of where they've ended up in their career. There's been, some left-hand turns, some zigging, zagging, so on and so forth. And I'd be curious to hear, a bit of your backstory, how you ended up where you are right now.
Oh, by accident. Absolutely.
Yeah,
This was
you
not
fit in
at
that
all
bucket.
planned.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I mean the real story is that Columbia University, where I went to college, did not accept AP credit, and I was bound and determined to never take another math class. I had, I had done calculus. I did very well in my AP exams, and I thought, aha, I'm done. And then Columbia said, oh, we don't accept AP credit. So there was a math science requirement at Columbia, and I said, okay, what science class has no math or very little math involved?
Yeah.
And it turns out it was forensic anthropology, and I really loved forensic anthropology. I had no idea that I would love it, but human skeletal anatomy, human skeletal morphology, and I ended up with this accidental minor in forensic anthropology because I took every single class that they offered on it, and physical anthropology. So I went to college with the goal of being the first American woman to be asked to join the Royal Shakespeare Company. And I realized I'm not a great actress. So probably that dream was not going to happen. And so, my advisor said, well, look, you love forensic anthropology. Why not look into forensic science?
Yeah.
And I said, okay, sure, I can do that.
Yeah. Slightly different path, I might add. Slightly different than what the dream is, but yeah.
Yeah, well, to keep to my roots, I do have a little plastic skull on my desk, and I've named it Yorick. So, okay. Shakespeare's there.
Okay, it's still part of your life. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, and then I went to grad school for forensic science, and NCIS recruits from that graduate program for forensic scientists. And I interviewed with them, I interned with them, and they said, well, great, you're a good candidate, but you don't really have a lot of work experience. So that's when I went and I became a crime scene investigator for a local police department in Kansas for a bit.
Yeah.
And then NCIS called a year and a half later and said, hey, would you like to be an agent now?
Wow, there you go. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, it fits perfectly in what I was just speaking of, like these career paths that they're tough to foresee. Again, it's so rare where these people have this vision, like this is exactly where I want to end up, especially within their youth, maybe in their teens or even younger, and they actually go and just follow that straight line. Like yours perfectly fits into that other bucket where it's just a little of serendipity, a little bit of exposure to this idea, that opportunity, and there you go. And
and I'm old, so this was before the CSI TV show came out, before the NCIS TV. I had never heard of NCIS. I didn't really know what CSI was when I started. So
yeah. Wait, did you have like any? I don't know if you can recollect or not, but like, do you have any? I don't know, like an interest in your youth in societal deviance? Like, was that a thing? Like, for example, crime shows, not those ones per se, but like that genre? Like, was that something that you were interested in? Or
yeah, I certainly read a lot of Agatha Christie novels when I was a kid. I don't know if that counts or not.
We can make that count. Why not?
Yeah, but no, I really did not have any sort of background in it. Of course, there's always police shows on television, and I'd seen Law and Order, but it wasn't ever anything that I had considered for a career, for a job. I think my father is very relieved about all this. He was afraid he was going to support me for the rest of my life as I tried to be an actress. So
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's really interesting how you did end up there and yeah, built a thriving career, most definitely. Well, maybe we go into this other segment of Q&A discovery and kind of just continue this back and forth. And, we've already drawn reference to this already a little bit here, but I thought it'd be worthwhile to kind of debunk some of these media perceptions or, views of what these jobs are all about. I understand like when you're working as a CSI for that police department, you actually wrote a book, based on debunking a lot of the myths related to the work of a CSI. And I was thinking maybe we could, shift that on over into NCIS. Certainly there's been a show based on that for almost running for 20 years and some spin-offs as
Yeah, many
well.
spin-offs.
Yeah, right. So, there's certainly a lot of, I think, built up perceptions of what that work is all about. We already know from what you've shared about Excel and Excel entries and learning the finer details of that. That's one element in the paperwork, but maybe there's a few more things as well that you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference with a TV show versus real life is the TV show, for obviously for Hollywood reasons and for
Yeah.
the ease of viewers, you have an entire team of people working on a single case each week, and that is just simply never going to be the case. If you are in a busy office at NCIS, you may have 30 investigations going on at any given time, and so things will obviously take a lot longer because if you work on one case a day and you have 30 cases, it's going to be 30 days before you get back to that first one again.
Yeah.
So having that team of people, yes, we certainly can surge people if there's something major that happens. But for most criminal investigations that come in the door, you as the case agent are going to be working that mostly by yourself, maybe with the support of one other person part of the time because they have their own cases to work.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, so that's I think probably the biggest thing. I do remember my mom calling me after the first NCIS episode, and she said, "Oh, they're stealing the Air Force One to take a body from the FBI because they're asserting jurisdiction." I thought, "Oh, Mom, the Secret Service would shoot me before I got near Air Force One."
Okay. In terms of, I guess, even the length of some of these, like, or the amount of time that you're able to devote to one particular case, certainly it's going to vary based on the severity of it and then, the significance of it. But generally speaking, like, how long would a case,
It
go?
really does depend. So many people ask me that. How long does an investigation take? People
Yeah.
who are reporting a crime, they've been a victim of a crime. How long is this going to take? And I wish I could give them an answer. But the truth is, if we have to send things out for lab work, the lab handles everything from all of NCIS and all of the military, really. So the Air Force, the Army. So it can be months before we get results back. And then, of course, in fraud investigations, there's that TV show for homicides, 48 hours. They say if you don't know who's done it in 48 hours, you probably won't catch the killer. So the first 48 hours are the most important. And for fraud, we joke and we say, oh, the first 48 months are the most important for fraud. If you can't catch them in the first 48 months, then you're probably not going to get them. So.
Okay. Yeah, okay. This other question here too. In terms of the amount of investigations that you have ongoing at the same time, would you have several that you're working on, like congruency? You've got a
Oh,
few on your plate at
yes.
once. Like, what would that be like?
Yeah, so I've never in 19 years with NCIS had only one case going on at the same time. So, it's a uh, constant time management issue of okay, I have this case that I'm working on right now this morning, but then I have this person coming in for an interrogation in the afternoon on this different case, and then I'm going to be working with a contracting officer, to understand this contract fraud. I live in Japan, and so oftentimes they're somewhere else in the United States. So I'll be up very early or very late talking to them.
Okay.
So
All right.
yeah, it's a very much a time management
Yeah,
struggle.
definitely. A lot of like being pulled in this direction or that direction, I would assume as well. It sounds like, that could be demanding. But again, returning to that point, a bit of positivity. That sort of adds a bit of intrigue to your work too. You're constantly on your toes, and there is some benefit to that. Again, it's probably a lot of stress at different points, but some benefits as well to that. as far as this definition of, or this perception rather, of the program, how the media portrays it, is there anything that is spot on? They're like, yeah, they're doing a pretty good job of representing this aspect, this particular one. Is there anything there?
So I think that the shows are pretty good about showing camaraderie and people, as soon as something comes in, everyone's going to like grab their jacket. Okay, let's go, let's help. And I think the show does a really good job of that. The TV show portrays that pretty well. And then also, the dedication of the people. Everyone that I've ever worked with, we all believe in this mission of protecting the United States, defending the Constitution, and then also basically protecting the military folks and figuring out what really is going on with any particular report. So I think in that personal aspect, the show does a really good job.
Okay. Well, I do have this other question here too for you, Laura, and it's, I was curious about this when I was putting this outline together. Like, to what degree would you say this work demands a certain character, a certain type of individual? I'd be curious about that a little bit.
So we come from all different backgrounds and all different skill sets. And I can't say that there's any one particular trait other than critical thinking skills. If you're going to do this job, you have to have good critical thinking because your goal is to find the truth. A report comes in and you have to figure out what really happened. So, we have people who come from a military background or from a law enforcement background, but then you have people like me where, I was an English major. Like, no one's paying me to recite Shakespeare, but, I had a lot of good analytical skills from that. We had someone from a few classes after mine in training who was coming as a circus contortionist, and she was joining us as part of our surveillance team because she could get into spots that most other people couldn't.
Really? Really?
So,
that one, wow, I was not expecting to hear something like that, but yeah, there you go. All right.
Yeah, I mean, people come from all different backgrounds, and there's so many specialties within as well. So people who have expertise in computers or language skills. There's a lot of type A personalities in law enforcement. I am not one of those. I am, much more of a like, okay, let's analyze this, think about this, sit down, talk about our feelings. So sort of agent, we joke that I'm not the one who breaks down doors. I would bounce off them. So you can come from all different backgrounds, but the important thing is, that you understand the mission and you understand the reason why you're doing this.
What would you say to this idea? I mean, the job changing you in some respects. You came into it in this form, or viewing the world this way, or with this particular set of skills. But after having done it for this amount of time, you've shifted and changed, for the better, maybe for the worse in some respects. From the work itself. What would you say to that?
So I do think it's very easy to get jaded in this line of work, and it's something that you need to work very hard at to sort of fight that tendency to remember that every new case that comes in is new for the person who's reporting it, and so I do think that it is something that I work on constantly, and I think that a lot of agents do, because you don't want to express to someone who's coming in and reporting a crime that this is routine for you, or maybe give the impression that it's not as important, because it's important to them. So I do think that in that respect, you have to sort of fight against that. And I think the other thing too is I've learned so many different skill sets. I came in as a forensic person. Now I'm a certified fraud examiner. Never thought that would have happened in a million. I deal with math a lot now and pivot tables. That was never my goal.
Yeah. Okay. That definitely sort of fills in some of the blanks there. Definitely. Okay. As far as, I guess, I mean, the job itself too, I have this perception of it, of certainly, being stressful at times, again, based on some of the work that you are involved with. Maybe you could talk to me about that a little bit. I mean, in terms of the skills of compartmentalizing maybe and managing stress and some of the pressures that have come associated with the type of work that you do.
It can be very stressful. Law enforcement can be very
Yeah.
stressful, and there's a lot of mental strain. I did 5 years doing undercover online child pornography operations, and so the things that you have to see and the things that you have to watch because you have to testify in court as to yes, I viewed this. Yes, this is child pornography. So I am a very loud and proud advocate of therapy. So I have a great therapist. I think it's very important.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
there can be a lot of stigma about therapy with law enforcement and the military. People worried it will affect your security clearance.
Mm,
But I think when I first started 19 years ago, I think there was a lot more stigma surrounding it. Now
yeah.
there has been this very concerted effort and push by the military, but also by my agency and my director to really kind of open up the idea that yes, wellness is important, therapy is important. You won't be jeopardizing your career if you seek help.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important because you have the stereotype of the police officers who will just go and drink. The
Yeah.
cop bar, you just go and you go drink every night and sort of numb yourself that way. And so for me, I have a great therapist. She helps me work through things. And also I was an English major, so I write, as
Mm,
part of that
mm,
therapy.
yeah. That's
So
definitely encouraging to hear. I mean, it would seem, at least within the last, I don't know, 3, 5, 7 years or so, that there has been this shift, this more, I don't know, awareness of these issues and openness towards them. It's okay to be sharing it. It's okay to seek, help. It's okay to engage yourself in some self-care, from time to time, especially with, a line of work that you're involved with, what you were just describing there. I mean, it would certainly make sense to be doing that. So it is encouraging to hear that it is, you know, that movement is infiltrating that sort of, area of work as well, within the military and within your units. So yeah, that is definitely a good thing. Most definitely. I do have this other question here. I would like to shift on over. And, when I was a university student, I was a sociology grad. So I did take some undergrad courses on criminology and then social deviance and whatnot. And the one thing I do remember from that time, it was quite some time ago now, was that this idea of each generation coming through is assuming that their generation is the worst in terms of crime. Crime is on the rise. Well, in fact, the reality, at least at that time, 20 years ago, I guess, crime, a lot of different types of crime, were actually on the decline, despite public awareness or perceptions of it being the opposite. And I'd be curious about, that aspect in terms of how the work that you're involved with, what you're seeing, maybe certain types of crime maybe are on the decline despite the perception of the media, whereas other types of crime maybe are actually increasing. Maybe you could set the record straight for us a little bit on issues relating to that.
Well, I certainly think that there's a public perception of crime being committed by like violent crime being committed by strangers as being on the rise or
Yeah.
being prevalent, and that hasn't been my experience. Throughout my career, like generally, it has been crime committed by someone the victim knew, by a trusted friend or a loved one or just a coworker, but they didn't know the person. So I do think that that crime committed by strangers is a lot rarer than is portrayed in the news media, or at least that's been my experience. Now, when it comes to fraud, there's a lot of government money being thrown around. I think fraud is sort of always present. So I don't think there's been any increase or decrease in that. Anytime you have a lot of money and a lot of different contracts, there is going to be some of that. But and we have analysts who look at the numbers, so I would need to defer to them as the experts. But even if there is an increase, the question is always: is there an increase because people are more comfortable reporting, or is there an increase because there's more crime being committed? So, I think to dig down into that is something that analysts and sociologists and psychologists are still struggling with.
Okay.
You have anonymous surveys to say, have you been a victim of a sexual assault, to try to get numbers and figure out how many are reporting, how many are not.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I do feel like people are more comfortable reporting those kinds of crimes now than they were certainly when I started.
Okay. Okay. Well, you could shift on over into a different area of work that you're involved with, which, threat management unit. I would assume this falls under, terror threats. And there is this morbid fascination, I would say, for this type of criminal activity, and for obvious reasons. I mean, there's been some, pretty terrible things that have occurred for, across human history. And, I'd be curious to hear your take on that aspect of your job, as far as, I don't know, whether there has been an uptick on that, or whether there's just, more emphasis and attention brought upon issues relating to that. Maybe you could fill us in a little bit on that point.
Well, I do think that anytime there's an attack of that nature, you have an immediate media frenzy.
Yeah.
And so it gets a lot of headlines, and it may get a lot of headlines for a long period of time. Now, when something happens, obviously we will surge agents, from all over the place to,
Yeah.
and it's not just us. If there's a terror attack happening, the FBI is going to be involved. ATF is going to be involved. It's never just one agency. You need everyone to kind of pull together for that. And it is very stressful when those kinds of
I can imagine.
investigations.
Yeah.
Because not only are you doing your best to make sure that everything is investigated thoroughly, but you also obviously have a spotlight from, everyone in the government wants answers immediately. The media wants answers immediately. And so, you're sitting there going, okay, I'm going to sift through all of this debris to try to find evidence, and it's going to take 4 days. Then, well, okay, well, in 3 hours, can we do a press conference? Well, I may or may not have answers for you.
Right. 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 Right.
So yeah, it is a very stressful time for, I think, everyone involved. But the idea is you do have to compartmentalize and sort of block that out. Okay, this is my job. I am going to go through. I have the training for it. I've done post blast, scene work. So we're going to be looking for certain pieces of evidence, or we're going to be checking social media to figure out who was involved in this, who their person's contacts are, and then fan out and start interviewing folks. So this, in those kinds of situations, you're never going to be working by yourself. And the agency isn't going to be working by itself. There's going to be multiple partners.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of the amount of time that you're devoting to that type of investigation these days, would you say there's been a significant uptick, or is that, again, just a media sensationalism sort of?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that for me personally. Well, I'm stationed in Japan, so we haven't had a number of attacks of that nature out here. And so for me personally, I haven't had to deal with that for quite some time. There are other NCIS agents who sit on counter-terrorism task forces with other agencies. And so their time is almost exclusively devoted to those kinds of investigations. And yeah, so it's not something I deal mostly with. I think more insider threats. So, there could be a terrorist attack by someone who's already within the military.
Okay.
But that's, I think the sensationalist ones tend to be the external attacks.
Okay. I see. All right. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, I think this conversation to this point is painting this really nice picture of the work that you do, and in terms of a number of different angles basically here. And I think it's really helpful to a lot of people that are maybe considering this line of work, but then two, maybe we're just tuning in just for the sheer interest in it. Again, how it's portrayed within the media is one thing, but to live it and work it is another. Which leads me into this last question within this segment. And I'd be curious, maybe we go pie in the sky here a little bit, but like, what is this profession, this line of work come to mean to you over the amount of time that you've spent within it?
So that is a somewhat difficult question, very philosophical. But
Yeah.
I mean, at the core, when I started in law enforcement, one of the things that I was looking at was the fact that the news stories were about untested rape kits, and that things were not being investigated thoroughly, sort of in the 90s, early 2000s. And so I thought to myself, well, I can make sure that things are investigated properly. Things are rape kits will be tested. At
Yeah.
least I can control that piece of it for my investigations. And that has been kind of the core throughout, is how do I best help and serve the men and women who sign up to fight and defend the United States.
Mm,
And so I try to keep that kind of in the forefront of my mind. And
yeah.
even in fraud investigations, it's not just taxpayer dollars. It's a matter of, are we getting proper night vision goggles, or are those goggles going to fail on the battlefield and put people's lives in danger? So, at the core of it, it's about making sure that the people, I mean, these are 18, 19-year-old kids who are signing up to fight. And so to make sure and do what I can to help protect them and make sure they have what they need.
Mm,
So
mm.
that's kind of always been at the forefront of my philosophy.
Yeah, yeah. No, I thank you for trying to answer that, and I think you did a really nice job of putting it out there, because I think like oftentimes like people will sort of examine these jobs from a nuts and bolts perspective of like, okay, these are the roles and responsibilities that I need to fulfill, but they almost in a sense can distance themselves for what that actually means within their own lives, and the meaning that could be derived from that, or the satisfaction that could be derived from that. So I often like to to throw in these questions from time to time that go a little bit deeper, but also provide this sort of different view and vantage point of what the work you could mean for an individual. And yeah, it was nice of you to share that, so thanks. But maybe we could shift into this other middle segment, a water cooler story segment. And here I just ask guests to indulge listeners with a story related to their profession. And I'm really eager to hear what you have for us today, Laura.
Yeah, so I guess the short version is I am still a little concerned that I might be on a watch list in Germany. But I was stationed
I'm liking how this is setting up, but yeah, continue.
so I was stationed in Italy, and as a forensics person, we had a murder case up in Germany, and they sent me up to assist with that. And so it was an Air Force case for the most part, but the Navy was involved, and so I went up and I landed in Germany, and of course the Air Force agents were already joking because there's the NCIS TV show. There had been a press conference where someone at my headquarters had said, "Oh, we're sending a task force," and so I get off the airplane and they're like, "Oh, hey, it's the task force." and and so we're there processing the crime scene, and I had this moment of realization where I realized that the cleaner that the individual used to clean up the scene and cover up the murder wasn't really a great cleaner, and we could still use luminol, and we could see the blood trail. And sure enough, we turn the lights out, you spray the luminol, and blue streak lit up. Aha! Like this is where they dragged the body away. And so you have this very odd dichotomy of emotion where you have this aha, I've got you, and this sort of elation, and then also the sort of sickening realization of this is where a young man, lost his life.
Yeah.
And so, but you try to ride that high of at least I can help get justice for the person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like I'm heading back home. I have done my crime scene, and German authorities pull me aside at the airport and going through security. And suddenly I'm in a tiny interrogation room because I had set off their radiation detectors. Luminol is slightly radioactive. And so now I have to try to explain to German authorities that I was not skulking around their nuclear sites. And so they don't care about my badge or my
Yeah.
credentials. Like, this is a
Right.
foreign country. So,
Right.
so I'm
Right.
trying to explain, okay, have you seen the NCIS TV show, Mark Harmon, the blank expressions? And so, in desperation, I was like, okay, CSI. And the man's face lit up. He's like, oh, CSI Grissom. I love Grissom. I was like, yes, yes, I am Grissom for the Navy. To explain. And so, eventually, like, so he made some phone calls, and I don't
Yeah.
speak German. I don't know what he
Yeah.
said. But I did hear the name Grissom a few times. So I'm assuming that it was all explained, and they did let me go eventually after about like an hour in the interrogation
Yeah.
room.
Yeah. Well, that
So,
is
but I was
great.
thinking, they don't really train you for this. Like, this never came up in any of my training. What do you do if
Yeah.
the German authorities think you've been like spying on
Grissom,
their
Grissom.
nuclear
You just have to drop that name a few times over. Harmon as well. Perhaps they should have a little segment within the training. If you do run into issues overseas, that here are your fallback options. If
Yes.
Harmon doesn't work, yes, please make reference to Grissom and
Yes.
CSI.
So as much as I like to debunk CSI, I am incredibly grateful to the TV show that I'm not on any kind of list right now.
Well, thanks for sharing that story. I mean, that might make its way into the my life as a Hall of Fame water cooler story segment. That's a good one. Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, we're just blowing through this talk here, Laura, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm sure listeners are as well. And I do want to go into this last segment here, a crystal ball segment. And as the name implies, we're usually looking towards the future, trends, predictions, so on and so forth. And it would seem to me, I mean, that technology is a big part of your job. Certainly in terms of the tools, maybe that you're using at different points, and maybe what the tools or things that some of these bad actors are also engaging in, maybe within fraud and new software and whatnot. So I'm guessing there's like this cat and mouse game that's back and forth, perhaps at least. But I'd be curious about your perspective or your take on this. The role of technology perhaps on your side, but then also you guys trying to catch up to what some of these individuals are doing to take advantage of others or the system.
Yeah, you do have to have a bit of a crystal ball, especially with technology and how things are being used, because back in 2007 or whenever Bitcoin first came out, like I don't think anyone really predicted that cryptocurrency was going to be the methodology of choice for people to launder money and to work and to commit their fraud schemes. And of course, now a Bitcoin is worth $10,000 or more, and so it's a viable method for hiding money and for laundering money. So in fraud, cryptocurrency has suddenly become one of the things that we're looking at. NFTs are the same way. So yeah, you do have to have sort of a constant new training on all the different technologies, all the different ways people could commit fraud. One of the things that I think is going to be big in the coming years is deep fake technology. And we saw the beginning of, I think, massive fraud schemes when, or not really the beginning of massive fraud schemes, but the possibility of it when Twitter rolled out this verified system and the blue checkmark system, and people started impersonating brands. And so you had someone pretend with a blue checkmark to be Eli Lilly and say, we're giving away insulin for free. Like, we're not going to charge for insulin anymore. And suddenly Eli Lilly's stock just plummeted off of that. And so if you had someone who was doing deep fake technology or impersonation, they could very easily do market manipulation. And again, on the one hand, you have people say, oh, well, it's the stock market, who cares? But you have teachers' pensions that are invested in these
lives.
Yeah. There are a lot of small business owners who are invested in, and so it really affects their life. Or affects their retirement. So, I always try to bring it to a personal level and to sort of put everything in perspective. But I think that deepfake technology is going to be one of our biggest challenges in the coming years.
No doubt. Yeah. I mean, that's a tricky one to even consider how. I don't know how. Maybe there's going to be software that's going to be able to detect it. I don't know, but yeah, definitely. I mean, that's certainly the way you just spelled it out is a threat of significant magnitude, no doubt, for what it could mean to a lot of people and make your lives, people like yourself, trying to find out whether this is accurate or not. Quite challenging to say the least, and then also too, I suppose, this whole rise of AI and, recently, I mean, every single episode that I've had in the last 2 months, I think, is always tracking back to Chat GPT, like how that's going to be, leveraged as well. But on both sides, perhaps, I mean, there's going to be some give and take there where, people like yourself.
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of technological tools to help us and to sort through sort of the wheat from the chaff in terms of what's important, what's not. We can be on the dark web, searching for things as well. So we have a lot of tools for that. I think in the future we're going to have less of a separation between the folks who are cyber experts and sort of the rank and file, foot agents, the street agents, because every agent is going to have to be conversant in the cyber realm. I'm very interested to see what happens with the metaverse. And I'm also a little bit relieved that I'm coming to the end of my career. And so, hopefully I won't be dealing with that as much. It's going to be the next generation of folks. But I do see that. I see the younger agents coming on who are much more savvy than I am. And I do try to keep up to date. So,
yeah, that's a really good point, though. I think you're spot on with that. At least from an outsider's perspective, it's going to become just like a part and parcel of that job. Is you're going to have to be coming in with a baseline of understanding, of these elements and how they can be used from a nefarious standpoint, or leveraged to help root out some of these individuals or actions that they're involved with. So I think it's a really interesting point to kind of look at it all from. I do have this very last question here, actually maybe a question, I don't know, observation, but again, returning to your work in the past, as a CSI, you did have a book that came out. I think was it 2012? Was that in my mind?
Yeah, 2012.
Yeah, Bunny Suits of Death, Tales of a CSI. And I lightly spoke of it already in terms of you sharing your recollections and your background during that year and a half or so for the Wichita Police Department. And there within the book, I mean, there was a lot of wonderful reviews, and a lot of people, when I was researching for this talk, just to get a kind of broad perspective on you and your background, a lot of people in the comments were praising the work, for one, but then two, were like, oh, please, like, when is the NCIS book going to come out? Like, we want the inside look at what that line of work is all about. So, I'd be curious whether or not you'd like to comment on that. Is there any possibility of some of your fans getting a look at this work down the line?
Well, I have plenty of stories from the career. So it probably would have to wait until I retire. But I have been storing them up. So yeah, and again, you can retire after 20 years. I've been on 19. So, I'm going for another 5 or so, but probably so I'll retire on a Friday. Monday the book will come out, something along those lines.
All right. Well, in the meantime, I guess for those 5 years or so, they're just gonna have to keep replaying this podcast episode perhaps, and going over these stories. So yeah, I'm fine by that as well, I guess.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, Laura, I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I can't believe we've blown through this talk. It's I felt like we just got started here, but I think that speaks to the point of it, being really interesting and engaging. And I thank you immensely for all that you've shared today.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you for having me.
Well, for those interested in learning more about Laura and her work, you can check her out on LinkedIn, and she also has a photography site. You can check that out as well, and I'll also provide links for her book, so you can go look at all of these different things, and all of this will be in the show notes. And again, I mean, if you like today's show, please be sure to share. It goes a long ways as far as getting this information, this content out to people. Maybe it's somebody that who's interested in this line of work, or maybe you yourself are interested in it. But getting it out there, and it certainly helps. And you can rate, review, and subscribe wherever you access your podcast. And then one more thing, you can head on over to YouTube. Within the last year or so, I did launch a channel over there where I do host the video portions of the content. And you kind of take it in a different manner. Off the top, I will have some imagery associated with the talk. And I mean, if you do go over there, I'm trying to grow that channel out. It's fairly new. It needs a bit of love. So if you wouldn't mind, hit that subscribe button. It would definitely help a lot. And finally, don't forget to tune into the next episode of Life As, where we'll continue to explore and unearth the details of professions and the people behind them. I'm your host, Christopher Schoenwald. Until next time, stay curious about life and living.